Panasonic. What's good, everybody? James Jackson here, back again with another video. If you're new here, I do tips, tricks, news, and reviews for the film and video making industry. So if this is content that you like, definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forth. Today, we are going to be talking about another product that was announced. There's three products from Panasonic, but we're going to focus on one product in particular, and that is going to be, of course, the Lumix S1II. If you guys would like to see more, I talked about the DJI Mavic 4 Pro. I gave my initial thoughts on that announcement, as well as going live with Ordinary Filmmaker, gave my thoughts on it. So definitely go check those out. I'll leave links in the description. But today it's Panasonic. And it's quite interesting how the change from how I felt this morning before the official announcement versus how I feel now after the official announcements and all the details have finally came through, which is kind of the complete opposite of what happened with the DJI Mavic 4 Pro, where interest peaked versus how I felt afterwards, mainly be due to the cost of it. And also all the information pretty much got leaked ahead of time. Whereas here, a good amount of what the specifications were kind of got leaked, but not all of them. And the ones that didn't get leaked really caught my attention and has really raised my intrigue to the point where I am very, very curious about this camera. And today I'm going to go over the main features that I do like about this camera, and the things that I don't like about this camera. And for me, is this a camera that I would actually maybe trade in my Sony FX3 for? And should you consider this camera if you are a professional filmmaker and video content creator? So that is basically what I'm going to be covering today. So first, quickly, I'm going to go over highlight features. Essentially, if you guys remember what the GH7 provided, essentially take that, add in a couple other additional features with a brand new partially stacked sensor, and put in a full frame body, and essentially you have the S1II. A lot of the recording options and video features that you got from the GH7 is in here, including open gate recording options, 6K 60 frames per second recording options, internal ProRes recording options, ProRes RAW internal recording options, recording to SSD, internal 32-bit float recording if you buy the audio accessory with it. You will get Airy Log C3 if you purchase the license for that, and that is going to be coming to a future firmware update. 4K, 120 frames per second, no crop, and 1080, 240 frames a second. You get the dynamic range boost mode that was in the GH7, and you also get dual native ISO performance as well. But like I said, if you basically took what the GH7 had, which was the body, including that multi-variant angle screen, which I absolutely loved of the GH6, and was happy that I saw it in the S1R2, and I'm happy to see it on the S1II. Basically, a lot of that is it, but there are some other key features that even the rumors I wasn't really sure. The first one is, of course, the fact that not only can you shoot 6K open gate, and typically at that 30 frames a second, but there's now a downsample 5K option that you can shoot up to 60 frames a second in open gate. Now, there is a catch, and I'm going to get to that catch. But I will say this is pretty cool because, especially for a lot of people that want to shoot content, have content creators, or maybe want to try test out using the full capabilities of 3x2 1.5 squeeze anamorphic lenses to really enhance it. This is going to be a good potential option to have, though there is limits, which again, I'm gonna get to that with my cons. But the fact that there is 60 frames per second option to me is something that is like, okay, that pushes the barrier that I wasn't anticipating. So I'm glad that this is, and it's going to be the first Lumix camera to actually offer this. The next one, and this is the one that really caught my attention that I was not anticipating, but I'm so happy to see. This again is a brand new sensor. It's a partially stacked sensor, which means the rolling shutter has been significantly reduced. So in open gate recording, if you don't have the dynamic range boost mode on, you can get anywhere between 15 to 16 milliseconds, depending. This is based on various videos that I've seen, but you're going to get 15 to 16 milliseconds in open gate recording option. That is basically, you get to use the full height and width of the sensor and get, I would say, is decent rolling shutter speeds. Not great, not terrible. It's anywhere near something like the FX3 with its 8 milliseconds, or the Canon R5 IIs with its 6.5 milliseconds, let alone something like the Ursa City 12K or the Venice that has 3 to 4.5 milliseconds. So again, it's not industry leading, but that is still significantly better than the 22 to 28 milliseconds readout options. Now, to be fair, if you turn that dynamic range boost mode on, you're going to get more of those options. That to me is pretty damn impressive, and I think that is solid, and that is a significant boost in my personal opinion. Speaking of boosts, we of course gotta talk about the dynamic range boost. Now, I've made a video regarding the dynamic range boost in terms of the GH6 in my GH6 review. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link up here. But of course, it got significantly improved from the GH6 to the GH7, and now we're seeing the same thing improved yet again with the S1II, where now, before at the top was like 15 plus stops of dynamic range, now Panasonic is touting that this is going to be 15 stops of dynamic range. Now, as always, just because the camera company says it's this much, take it with a grain of salt. Always wait to do research. And also, at the end of the day, let me say this once again, at some point, dynamic range gets, it's just irrelevant, or it becomes less and less relevant. Pretty much, if you can get 12 stops of latitude performance, everything beyond that is, basically nice, sweet goodness. It's not necessary. Just a simple amount of light, like right now, and you can pretty much go into almost any shooting scenario. And more importantly, you have more, with lighting, you'll still have more control. Lighting is always going to be the more priority thing versus having higher dynamic range. It's going to typically cost you less, and it's going to give you a better performing and better looking image overall. But having said all that, this is still a great thing to see that the dynamic range has definitely improved. We're now getting anywhere between 0.8 to a whole stop improvement on the S1II compared to its predecessor. The last thing I want to talk about is a lot more of the workflows and the list of support features that this camera is going to provide that I'm super excited about. Number one, of course, it's going to produce false color, which is a whole new thing that has been for less term as Lumix cameras, where most of them basically have been waveform, but having false colors is such a huge deal internally. I'm excited about that. The other thing that I am excited for is the new Flow app that they have, where you can connect and you can have control over the camera via your phone, which I think this is definitely going to be a lot of the ways going forward. It's still, to me, not as robust as Monitor Plus, even though that's a third-party app for the Sony cameras. Monitor Plus is still, to me, like one of the elite apps in terms of camera controls, simply because of EL Zone, which is not here in this camera, unfortunately. I know, I'm being super nitpicky and beggars can't be choosers, but I'm giving, this is my channel, I get to talk about what I want. You know what I'm saying? Features such as the multi-framing tool, which is going to come later in a firmware update, but the ability to be able to set multiple frame guide and frame marks on your monitor. Not only that, but you get to move it and set it to however you play, so it's not, for particularly 9x16, it's not dead in the center, where maybe you want to have your setting a little bit more off to the side. You get to do that, and I absolutely love that. But the one that actually impressed me is in terms of media. Now, just like the S1R2, man, these names are getting confusing. But with the S1R2, you can now have CF Express Type B as well as V90 SD cards, and you can record, obviously, with the higher resolutions and the higher frame rates, and with particularly the all-I options, you're going to need that CF Express Type B cards. And yes, you can use SSD cards. Now, for those of you that are familiar with my channel and you're familiar with me, you know I absolutely disdain writing to SSD cards for a number of reasons. I've talked about it, and I'll leave a video link in the description because I'm not going to waste time with that. So I was expecting that, as always. However, they added a feature and they've added a functionality with the SSD that I was not anticipating. And this, I think, for those who are like me that have very, very bad experiences and are very disdainful of recording to SSDs, and then those who are basically enthusiasts and pro SSD recorders, I believe what they added here was a happy medium. But essentially, what they did is now, through the Type-C port, you can actually connect an SSD and you can actually use it as a backup storage. Meaning, you can literally just, once you're recording, you can literally transfer all those files directly to the SSD right there and have an automatic backup. To me, this is the perfect solution, perfect backup solution. So now I can essentially, if I shoot in the non-AI codecs or very, very limited recording options that can go to both the CF Express as well as the SD card, I could do that as a safety track. But now I can also then take those and put those onto an SSD using the Type-C port, and I can just back it up. I think this is actually the perfect happy medium that I think that brings us all together, that satisfies both sides. And kudos to you, Panasonic, for doing that. Obviously, the caveat of all of this is, what's the transfer speeds going to be like? We'll see how it goes, but the fact that this is still possible is, to me, a amazing thing, because then if I'm on a long travel and I have to travel to go somewhere, I can basically, while I'm in the middle of traveling, I can just put it in that mode and just let it transfer and offload. So by the time I get to my computer, it's already on the SSD drive that I could do in and go start ready to work. Now, I said there's some things that I don't like, and there are. So let's go on to the things that irk me. And the big one is going to be like all these cool options. The 6K open gate option, the ability to shoot open gate at 60 frames per second, shooting 6K 60 frames a second, and shooting 4K 120 frames a second. These all sound amazing, except all of these are only available in H.265 10-bit 420 long GOP recording. And this is the bane. Now, I know for a lot of people, there's going to be people that are going to come in the comments and say there's not really a difference. You know, you're not going to really see a difference. And I'm going to say this right now as someone who is a colorist and someone who has gotten paid to color grade jobs. There is, I can assure you, there is a noticeable difference if you're doing serious grade work where you're putting masking, you're working with VFX. There is a noticeable difference from when you're using 10-bit 420 files and 10-bit 422 files. It is my personal belief, and again, it's maybe right now I only speak for myself. To me, having 10-bit 420 as the only option is, to me, not acceptable. 10-bit 422 should be standard across any recording option, especially since you have CF Express Type B. There isn't any excuse anymore, especially given the fact when you got companies like Blackmagic Design that allow you to record to CF Express Type B cards up to 12K resolution, more than double the resolution for two CF Express Type B cards if your card is fast enough. Which is why the Open Gate, while I'm excited for what the Open Gate does, this bummed me out because odds are I'm gonna use it very, very limitedly because it doesn't have 10-bit 422 minimum. Especially given the fact that you got cameras like the Pixis 12K that will be coming out later this summer that will shoot 12-bit RAW and Open Gate, and you can shoot it in 8K or 4K up to 72 frames a second. So I don't know if Panasonic actually sits and watches my videos. Probably not. But Panasonic, if you do, or for everybody who watches this send us to Panasonic and let them know, hey, I think it would really, really improve your sales. It really, really would help you if you put 10-bit 422 in all your recording options. The CF Express Type Bs are fast enough to handle it. That's just, to me, it should be, that's why I say 10-bit 422 should just be standard. So hopefully Panasonic, if you're watching, if you could put this in a firmware update where you can put 10-bit 422 across all recording options. I don't care if you have to do an entire new HEVC codec and make it a H.265 10-bit 422 option, like Canon has it, like Sony has it, or you find some other codec. I don't care. Find a way to get 10-bit 422 on all of the recording options. All this is now down to the price, which is going to come in at $3,200 US, which, comparing this to the rest of the market, I think this is a pretty great, fantastic offer that is happening. When you compare this to something like the FX3 and the Canon R5 II and the Nikon Z6, or even something like the Nikon Z8. So, and to me, I think it is priced competitively. But in terms of its competitors, of those other mirrorless cameras, this is a very, very good buying, in my personal opinion, in terms of the options. I mean, all these, there's some things that the R5 II and the FX3 have better, significantly improved rolling shutter performances. They also have, some better internal recording options in terms of the 12-bit RAW internally of the R5 II. In terms of the better, I think, 120 frames a second for the FX3. And there's just some quirks. But overall, in terms of all the other features, in terms of false color, having the option to shoot Open Gate, which none of those other cameras can do. It does have internal ProRes RAW, but I'm DaVinci Resolve, so ProRes RAW is essentially useless to me, but it is there. So if you are Premiere or if you are working in Final Cut, you got internal ProRes RAW, which is awesome. You have ProRes internally option installed, even though I'm starting to feel it's a little bit becoming more of a dated codec, and it's really starting to show its age as we progress through technology. But it is there, and I know it's still quite a popular one. You get all these different recording options. You get so many stuff for anamorphic supports. The list goes on in terms of features that none of these other cameras have. And it's priced less than the FX3, as well as less as the Canon R5 II, which leads me into saying, hey, am I going to be selling my Sony FX3? Short answer right now is no. I'm really excited. I'm going to see how this goes, but there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, in my particular area, which is the tri-state area, Sony, particularly the FX3, the FX6, and the Burano and Venice, they're highly popular and in high-end demand, which means I still can make money even just on the rentals of my FX3. Panasonic doesn't have that foothold right there. I hope that does change so we can make it more competitive and we can have a more competitive market, but Panasonic just doesn't have a foothold. So business-wise, it just doesn't make sense at the moment. The other thing is that, and this is going to seem silly, but this is a big deal because it changes my entire workflow and how things I am as a cinematographer and DP. But the fact that I have an app that allows me to use and access EL Zone, it makes such a difference. False color is a step in the right direction, but it needs to be EL Zone should be added to the S1II. I hope it does via firmware update, because also keep in mind, Panasonic already has EL Zone sort of installed in their VariCam lineup, which they've kind of sort of slowly sort of ended, then went fully focused on these Lumix cameras. So if I'm Panasonic, I'm like, why not just add EL Zone into this camera? If Panasonic, I would say, if you can add EL Zone and put that internally into the camera, that may be the thing that sends me over, because EL Zone really does change it. While false color is great, being able to specifically see how the stops workflow works, it changes everything. It makes shooting so much easier, but also it makes shooting way more fun. And then even for me, as a YouTuber and a content creator, there's more opportunities for me to sort of work with brands because of the E mount versus the L mount. But I think all of that's going to be changing soon as more and more lens companies and manufacturers start adapting the L mount alliance. But anyways, these are just my thoughts for my situation. But what about your situations? Should you consider the S1II? Short answer is, I don't see why not. The only exception I would say is if your situation is you actually work with a team, you work with a crew, and you got first day season people that are going to be needing to be up around the camera, or you work in a workflow that SDI is standard, I don't see how you don't consider this camera. I'm so happy that the rolling shutter is improved. It has amazing features and amazing qualities. You've got so much built right into it, and keeping your package small. There's just a few things that I win. There's a few things, but overall, if you're a wedding, if you're someone that does weddings, I don't see how you do not consider this. If you do corporate videos, I don't see how you not consider this. If you do documentaries, I don't see how you don't consider this. If you do narrative film with the Arilog C3, I don't see how you don't consider this camera. Unless you have certain specific needs that this camera just doesn't buy in terms of hardware, such as SCI, it doesn't have really a proper physical time sync part of it. Or you prefer something a little bit more modular design. In those situations, yes, there's other options. If you're not working in those type of environments, I don't see why you shouldn't pick up this camera or shouldn't even consider this camera. Anyways, these are my thoughts of the Lumix S1II. I would love to know what your thoughts are. Let me know. Leave your comments down below. And as always, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, take care, everyone.